the relationship of Ibrahim to this space, to this house, the establishment of the space in itself was made conditional. Conditional on what? Conditional that Ibrahim will purify, will maintain the space pure as a space dedicated to the worship of Allah. And it is a space for the ta'ifin, those who are going around the Kaaba, as later on, wal qa'imin, and those who are there in a state of iqama and worship, wal ruk'a sujud, and those who are in state of ruku' and state of sujud. Now, why is this important? Because this space was established for the specific purpose of serving God's defined objectives. What emerged after Ibrahim are the practices of Quraysh in this space. The practices, however, were a violation of the terms upon which Ibrahim established this house. Now, why is this important? Because Allah is saying, this is not a space to be shared. Although diversity will continue to exist on earth, and also Allah will resolve this diversity in the hereafter. When it comes to this space, this is a space revealed to Ibrahim for the specific purpose of upholding and affirming the primordial truth that so many people deny. The truth of Ibrahim and the truth of Muhammad. This is why this space cannot be shared between Muslims and the mushrikeen, the kuffar. I've seen in Islamophobic circles, and I've seen among ex-Muslims, they come and say, oh, well, the Quraysh, they complained that Muhammad insulted their gods. How intolerant of Muhammad. Oh, why can Muhammad come and end and destroy the idols and end worship? Because this location was established by Ibrahim on the condition, this was revealed by God. The very terms of that space from the beginning was Islam. And it is Quraysh who, with the passage of time, had violated these terms. So, this is why the area of Al-Haram al-Makki, or even possibly entire Mecca, but this is a whole debate, but is an exclusively Muslim Abrahamic area. Because these were the terms upon which this space was established in the first place. So, in other words, it is Quraysh that is in a state of violation by introducing all the idolatry practices. that in violation of the revelation given to Ibrahim. I mean, subhanAllah, it's like I was reading this thing by some, typical of these kids that love to, ex-Muslims and so on. They think they're so brilliant. I mean, the, the idea of sacred exclusive space does not in any way, is not in any way contrary to the idea of tolerance, because sacred space that is exclusive to a faith is entirely normal. And especially when the Quran itself tells us that this space from the beginning was a space dedicated for a purpose. And it is those who corrupted those purposes who, in fact, were in a state of violation, not those who are reclaiming the space for its purpose. So, when Allah says, وَطَهِّرْ بَيْتِي, so purify this space to Ibrahim. And that is the charge for the prophets, is that if this space is to be used at all, it must be used, it must be purified for the purposes for which it was established. Otherwise, the establishment of the space is pointless. Okay. The other really important point here is that this space as the Baiti is yet to come, but okay. This space is to be open for the purposes of worshiping God. In Islamic law that Muslims have completely ignored, there was a debate about whether Mecca, the entire of Mecca, is known as as-Sawa'ib or as-Sa'iba. Because it is open space, because it is sacred space, that those who have homes there have a right to their homes. Although some fuqaha disagreed, including reportedly Umar ibn al-Khattab disagreed. And because Umar and some fuqaha said no one is entitled to own property in Mecca. All of Mecca must be collectively owned by all Muslims. But that was a minority opinion. Most said it's a sa'iba. Sa'iba means that those who already have homes there, they have a right to their property. But beyond the homes that are already owned there, after Fath Mecca, all sales and rentals of property in Mecca are illegal. So, in fact, there is a hadith, and not just one, there are actually many, but the most famous of which says, Mecca mubaha, la tu'jar biyutuha, ولا تباع رباعها. Mecca is collective ownership, collectively owned. Its homes cannot be rented, and its fields cannot be bought or sold. So there's most jurists in Islamic history said لا يجوز بيع دور مكة وإجارتها لأنها لو ملكت لم يستوي فيها العاكف والباد. That you can't, it's not legal, it's not lawful to rent or buy in Mecca. The idea is what? That it must remain open space for Muslims where only collective homes are established on egalitarian principles. So if you can't sell a rental, then what is the medium upon which we decide who gets to stay in the collective housing created by the authorities? And Muslim jurists would say first come, first serve. In the same way that you have egalitarian principles when you do Hajj, the Mecca can never be allowed to be a place of for market competition, for competition, real estate competition, for expensive rentals and cheap rentals, expensive property and cheap property. This is why there's another hadith among many, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "احتكار الطعام في مكة إلحاد." If someone engages in a monopolistic practices in Mecca, it's one thing to commit sinful acts in sale and buying and selling, but if you commit it in Mecca, it's equal to ilhad, it's equal to kufr, it's equal to leaving the faith altogether. The sin in Mecca of the sin in Mecca of practices that would target the unprivileged is equal to kufr. It's so grave a sin that when Allah says that this is space dedicated to Allah, then it must reflect principles that reflect purely egalitarian principles. We all wear the same thing when we go to Hajj. Even sewing. Why is sewing not allowed? So that you can't have rich classes and poor classes. The distribution of food, it must be either prices that everyone can afford or distributed freely in Mecca. So, in fact, there's a hadith that says that مجرد إرادة الظلم في مكة محاسب عليها. That everywhere else on earth, Allah doesn't hold you accountable for your intentions. If you intend injustice but not committed, you're not accountable. You must commit injustice before you're held to account. Except in Mecca. In Mecca, even just intending injustice, you're accountable. So, most jurists said, when Allah says, "Man yurid fi بإلحاد بظلم," means that dhulm, injustice in Mecca, is equal to ilhad, is equal to leaving Islam altogether. Now, look how far we've strayed from that ideal. That this has to be open space. This is why Mecca in history was a sanctuary. Every person who was persecuted, they would escape to Mecca as a sanctuary. This is why also Mecca, before modern Saudi Arabia and colonialism, was the most culturally diverse part of the Muslim world. And this is also why, until the modern age, was colonialism, and Saudi Arabia you would visit even till the 60s. You would visit Mecca and you would be struck by the fact that there are no rich homes and poor homes. For centuries, that you could not, those who owned property in Mecca could not raise the price of rentals. In other words, prices were flattened and regulated, and it was always first come serve basis, because there were heavy restrictions on what type of gateways you can create in terms of access to Mecca. The last Hajj, not only Saudi Arabia decided that all, for what Muslims in the West, all Hajj has to go through the company that is owned by, in part by the Islamophobic Indian nationalists, Modi's people. But it was irregular thing was $20,000-$30,000, and a lot of people who had made their bookings, giving the money to travel agencies according to the old regulations, that company said, that's none of our business. Even if you paid, you have to pay all over again. And many people who paid had their reservations canceled, or so an enormous amount of corruption. Other than the fact that today Mecca is far from a classless society, leave alone far from an open space. Getting a visa to go to Mecca is a very big deal and a very costly thing. Muslims today think that this is the norm, think that it's always been like that. Muslims will sit there and talk to you about the Sunnah of the Prophet. What we are doing to Mecca is a violation of Allah's teaching in the Quran, a violation of the Sunnah, a violation of the balance of Sharia for most of Islam's existence. The extent to which you can tell that you are the products of thoroughly colonized minds is that you actually think that whether the voice of woman is awra or not is a big issue. But what is going on in Mecca is a minor issue. That speaks volumes, the extent to which you are thoroughly the product of a brainwashing of centers of power that tell you how to think and what to think about. Allah says, جعلناه للناس سواء العاكف فيه والباد. We've made this accessible. We've given it to whether those who live there or those who visit. Really? Today's Mecca is accessible to those who live there or those who visit? The very visa system that we take for granted is highly problematic. The very system of pay in advance before you can even set foot is highly problematic. The very system where some people can stay in hotel rooms overseeing the Haram and the Kaaba, while those who don't have the money must stay in hotel rooms that are far away and they have to walk several kilometers for every prayer, is not problematic. It is straight out haram. It is no question about it, haram. Okay. When you ask the vast majority of Muslims today and say, what does the meaning, what does Mecca is a sa'iba mean? They will look at you and have no clue. So-called experts on Sharia. They will just look at you and say, no clue. This past Hajj, Saudi Arabia allowed an Israeli journalist to go and turn Mecca into a tourist site. Israeli television was broadcasting the Hajj as this guy was going around filming it. Allah didn't allow Mecca to be a tourist site. Mecca is Allah's space. And the terms of that space was set by Allah to the Prophet Ibrahim until the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. It has a very special status, thoroughly purified. And that is precisely why it was possible or allowable for the Prophet ﷺ, upon conquering Mecca, to say, only Islam. Everywhere else in the world, you cannot make it only Islam. You're not allowed. But in Mecca, you can.